Hello, this is Lromanosky from Calgary, Canada, shooting from the Lugnuts facility. And what we have here is a very special car, a really interesting car. This is my Toyota Century. This is a 2002, what we call a Generation 2 Century and a GZG50, which denotes the second generation, and this is the one with the V12 engine. So there's a lot to cover with the Century, and I mean there's a lot of other YouTubers, content providers, good ones too, who've done videos on the Century. It's amazing how many of them have bought a Century or are thinking of buying a Century. The guys from Throttle House, or CarWow, the guy from CarWow says he's going to get one. And you know, the Century's been featured on, I mean, Jay Leno's Garage, kind of all the leading YouTube review sites. Demuro did a thing on a Century. Anyway, so we'll do this video. It'll probably be pretty long. I'll go through why I think a Century is interesting. I'll try to add to the amount of information that's out there. It's an uncommon car in North America. It was only really sold in Japan and not in very large numbers. So I'll try to fill in some background information on the Century, why I think it's unique, and then I'll kind of move into this particular Century, and we'll go through it, do a walk around video, go inside, outside, go through the car. But I'll try to impart the enthusiasm that I felt when I started reading about a Toyota Century and why I wanted one and why I went out and found one. Okay, so we'll start the video. We'll start the next section about the Toyota Century. In 1967, it was the 100th year of the birth of the Toyota founder, Mr. Toyota, and Toyoda, not Toyota. And they wanted to do a special car to sort of to celebrate the birth of their founder, and they came up with a large formal sedan called the Century. That's 1967. They made that car from 67 all the way to 96, and essentially it's the same form, although with some changes to instrumentation and so forth, but essentially the same car. It got a big redesign for 1997. Major redesign, and that included a V12 engine. That was Japan's only production V12 engine. Honda made a V12 in their Formula One car in the 60s, but there has, before or since, been a Japanese V12 in a production car. And the Generation 2 Century came out in 1997, went all the way out to, I think, 2016. And then for 2017, they redid it. And now there's a Generation 4, which is based on an SUV. So this Century is unique in that it has basically the body style of the original from 1967, but with the V12 engine that was bespoke to this car only. The V12 engine was not offered in any other Toyota products, only in this car. The Gen 3 Century used a Lexus hybrid drivetrain. So this is I think, the pick of all the Toyota Centuries. You could call it peak Century, just because it is the most unique. Now they made about 10,000 of them from 1997 to 2016. So a very small production run for Toyota. To put that in perspective, 10,000 production run, that would be similar to a Porsche 993 twin turbo. It was about 10,000. They made about 20,000 Mercedes 500Es, which is another kind of special sedan. I'm trying to think of other sedans that they would have run in a 10,000 unit production, and it's a pretty short list. So really, I mean, really low production. I mean, lower than that, you start getting into, Ferrari Dinos at 3,500. The Mercedes Gullwings and Roadsters at about that same number, if you combine both models, is very low. Okay, so that's what it is. It's a large formal sedan and made in small numbers with, for Japan, an exotic drivetrain. But it's more than that. This was an opportunity for Toyota to really showcase what they could do. It's almost like a cost no object exercise, a singular focus to achieve a design objective. Like other cars do the same thing. I mean, Gordon Murray had his F1 road car, which was the finest expression of a sports car, and the first Honda Insight was a design exercise to have a car with the lowest possible fuel consumption and made in an all aluminum body and a lot of magnesium and all kinds of exotic metals and so forth. Volkswagen had their version of that, the XL1, a two-seat diesel electric hybrid that was supposed to get down to 1 liter per 100 kilometers. So there's examples in the automotive kind of universe of times when car companies have tried to create something really special, really focused, and kind of put the accountants aside and just said, well, let's just build the best thing we can, the best way we can, using the best materials, and let's use this as a halo product and showcase what we can do if we put our mind and resources to it. So I love cars like that. Whether it's the first generation Insight hybrid, whether it's a Toyota Century, whether it's an exotic sports car, whether it's an off-road vehicle, whatever it is, when you put that much effort into something and try to create something really special, then all of a sudden, to me anyway, there's terrific pride and ownership of owning one of these machines that has that kind of attention to detail behind it, and happily, a Century is an affordable purchase. I can't afford a McLaren F1 road car, but let's go through why that is. So the design objective, well, it starts with this Japanese idea of modesty. In traditional Japanese culture, you don't want to flaunt your wealth. You don't want to fly around in gold-plated helicopters. You want to retain as much dignity and decorum and tradition and modesty. It's a very modest culture. It's not a showy culture. And so that's why the car isn't particularly flashy. It's, you could even look at it and you could even think, well, it's just kind of a boring sedan. Like, what's so special about it? So, but as you get closer into it and as you look closer at it and as you get some of the backstory and so on, you kind of fall in love with the car just because of all the attention to detail. And what they tried to create was basically the target market for this was the emperor or the emperor's family. And following that, VIPs and CEOs of companies and important dignitaries and so on. So what they tried to create was an experience to get driven, because the Century is a car meant to have a chauffeur. It's not an owner-driver car. Everything in the car is centered to the people in the rear. So they wanted to create this experience for the people in the back that was obviously comfortable, obviously serene, but they went a whole bunch of steps further than that. They wanted it to be easy to get in and out of in case you're transporting a female members of the royal family who would be wearing kimonos, who didn't have a lot of mobility. And so the sill in the back is lower. The grab handles are really huge in it, and that is so, they that people would be watching when people entered and got out of the car, and they wanted the people exiting the car to exit with as much dignity and grace as possible. So the door openings are wide, and the grab handle is large, and the sill is low. And then they framed the window in such a way that they figured that if people saw you from inside the car, and you can come over here, the aluminum window frame would be like a picture frame framing you in the car, and so that you would look, dignified and so on in the back of this formal sedan. Getting out of the car as you exited, you would then be able to check your appearance in the mirror finish of the paint. Because the paint was done to such a high level, there's a wide C-pillar, so it is meant that you fix your tie or do your makeup or whatever before you face the crowd. Okay, so they focused on entering the car and exiting the car gracefully with looking like, looking good in the car for all of your public admirers. And then inside the car for the rear, obviously you can see, if we get a close-up of this, the party trick of the car is the ottoman, which pops out from the front seat. And so then you would get in the car very easily with the low floor. You would pick up the shoe horn, undo your shoes, and then of course you can, I don't want to do this with my boots, but stick your legs through. And then when you're comfortable in the back, you've got a pillow on the side, you've got dimmable lights, so you can set the brightness, and then you have all manner of controls to move the front seat forward and back and up and down and so forth. You have all kinds of controls, electric controls for this seat to raise it up and down and forward and back. And you even have two kinds of adjustment for the rear headrests, which we can show you, massage seats and heated seats and so forth. You've got vanity mirrors, and you've got all kinds of different air vents. You've got air vents up here, air vents there, air vents here, so that there's a separate air conditioner in the back. So they're looking at the noise of the blower motors and the volume of the air and how comfortable you are back here. And everything is one button away from the sound system to the navigation to the two TV screens, one on the front and one on the back. And all of this can be controlled by the guest, the owner of the car, who's got somebody to drive him or her around, or the guest in the car if it's a VIP. So they went to what can only be considered elaborate lengths to create this insulated bubble that was consistent with this Japanese idea of grace, modesty, integration with nature, design elements from nature, harmony with the world around you. The manual goes on to say that the Century is acquired through years of hard work, the kind done in a plain but formal suit. The brochure goes on to say that the profile of the side of the car was influenced by the slopes of Mount Fuji, which is in the background of the factory where the car is made. You won't see a Toyota badge on this car, only Century. And then the logo is the golden phoenix. I think it's called the Ho-Oh. It's a mythical figure. These badges then are hand carved, which takes I don't know how many hours for only a select amount of craftsmen to work on it. And the factory is unique to the Century. It only makes the Century, at least it did at this time. It was made, like I said, in the in the foreground of Mount Fuji. One would work for Toyota for quite a number of years, and then they would apprentice with a Century builder or technician, and then after many years of apprenticing, then they would, be entrusted to work on the car. When there wasn't really an assembly line, so to speak, and there were only, a very few number of people that were authorized to work on the Century. When you went into the factory, you had the big golden phoenix on the door, and it said the best car in the world, which this car can lay a legitimate claim to being the finest production car money could buy. Not the most expensive, because there's more lavish cars, but in terms of production quality, I believe it is the best car in the world. And that's what it says above the door. So the design objective was to create this graceful, harmonious space where the dignified, modest Japanese member of the royal family or diplomat or CEO could be effortlessly transported from one destination to the other. Okay, so that's what this car is, and it's that singular focus which makes it, I think, so impressive. We'll put some links to how they make the car and the bodywork, but the metal work is particularly impressive. It's all hand finished. There's only, I think, 4, according to the videos and things that I've watched, 4 men that are qualified to finish the body on a Century. After everything is stamped, that's just where a normal car, you would stamp the panel and then you'd prime and paint it and do some finishing after. But with the Century, in the raw metal, the technicians get out all of their traditional metalworking tools. The tool set is hand fitted to their hands and their bodies. So each body man in a Century factory has their own bespoke set of tools. And then they will hand work the metal, and what that means is you'll tap it from the inside to get a little bit of a high spot, tap it from the outside to put it down, get a file and file it down, look at it, tap it a little bit more, and it's the way they built cars in the 30s. It's a coach-built tradition. It's not a mass market tradition. So, I mean, it takes, you can build a regular car, Yaris or something like that, in like 3 hours. Maybe a more complicated car, might take a couple of days. But I think these cars take almost a month to build, all in all. The paint takes a week alone. It's 7 layers of paint, up from normally like 4 layers for most cars. Diago Wealthy Green Metallic is the name of the color. And in the sun, again, it's really subtle, but the green fleck comes up. But what makes it unusual is they run water over the whole car, and it's wet sanded, between each coat. So if you look at the paint on a new Century or one that's in nice shape like this one, it really is just like looking in a mirror. I mean, this is almost a glass finish throughout the car. And then when you get the car all cleaned up and polished it, you start to realize all of the subtleties in the lines. Like, it looks a little bit slab-sided just from a distance if you don't pay attention. But you can see that you've got this faint character line which curves and runs the whole length of the body and then disappears into the front. And the back is a bunch of complex curves where you've got this character line running here, you've got another character line running here, you've got this line following and then joining with the top of the fender. So you've got a line here, a line there, and a line there. And of course, it all matches perfectly, perfectly. And so that kind of detail is, you know, I would say, you know, synonymous with this idea of Japanese subtlety, but also quality. It's almost like they said, well, let's create a really difficult panel and make it perfect, just so we can show everybody that we can. You'll also notice that there is a peak in the center of the hood, and you know, it slopes like that, presumably so that the water flows off it. And also there is another line here where there is a break in the metal, and it slopes down and slopes down again. So when you look at the car really closely, especially with this mirror finish paint, and then you see all the subtleties of these character lines, all of a sudden the car doesn't look boring anymore. And you realize sort of what went into it. The choice of materials is, you know, like the best available. We have aluminum for the window surrounds, and normally that's just sort of cheap plated metal, but in a Century it's aluminum. The chrome is extraordinary. I mean, this is a 20-year-old car, and you know, the chrome is beautiful on it. You know, I think that they said it takes 12 hours to polish each bumper, you know, on this car. So the lower sort of 4 inches of the car has this brightly polished chrome. Now, if you go, you can go in a showroom and see a new car, and it kind of looks like that. But the difference is, in 3 years, it's flaking off. This car is 20 years old. It has 180,000 kilometers on it, and that looks perfect, okay? And that's, I mean, that's the real, I mean, that's the quality speaking. This car is built to last a lifetime. The interior is wool, and of course, the Japanese prefer the fabric to the leather because it's quieter, a little bit warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. So this is a wool Jacquard fabric. In this particular car, it's the blue interior. I think there's 4 interiors for it. You know, we have brushed stainless for, you know, the door cards, and that would just about never be. I mean, that, and not only that, but it's, you know, it's got a beautiful edge to it. When you open the ashtray, when the car's on, there's a green light inside of it that kind of lights up. And you find these subtleties, you know, sort of throughout the car. Around the driver's side, you've got you know, the usual child locks and locking the rear window. You've got the 4 window switches. We have electrically adjustable top tether for the seat belts, and heated seats for both the driver and the passenger. In the manual, it says this is the driver's seat, that's the assistant's seat, and the owner's seat is in the back. We have, you know, the usual Toyota stuff, the power mirrors and folding mirrors and instrument elimination. The driver can then operate the passenger seat from here in case he needs to slide it up or do the recline. So I can slide this back and forth or recline it. And also the rear passenger can also do the same thing on that seat. Nobody can adjust the driver's seat except for the driver, but the rear passengers can adjust that seat. Okay, so we have an ionized filter, like an advanced climate control system. Again, like I said, we have dual air conditioning, separate air conditioning from the rear. We've got the usual CD player and so forth, navigation, which of course only works in Japan and not here. This is the 4-speed gearbox. Later centuries had a 6-speed gearbox, and we've got 3 modes for it. the snow and power and regular one, and the car has traction control, and we can turn that off. We have another button here. There's a button there for the ionizer, and a beautiful burr walnut cover for the center storage. We've got beautiful mirrors with vanity lights and mirrors, and we have this little tiny little sunshade there to block out the sun. But it's in the rear that we really have the most stuff. So I'll go around the other side. So the Century comes with its own Walkman and dictaphone. So that's a Sony product, but branded as a Century. I've got the cup holders. I've got my CD and climate control back here. I've got a button for microphones. I've got all my seat and seat memory for this seat, and so I can go down or up, and I can slide it forward, and I can slide it back. The headrests are interesting. I can push the headrest up, you can see this, and then I can also tilt the headrest all electrically. So we've got that mirrored on the passenger side, and then I can also move this seat back and forth. I can change the angle of that back and forth, and yeah, this is all for this seat. This is for that seat, and these two are for this seat here. And then if I don't want it, I can take this and just fold it away. I've got a little strap to hold my Walkman in place as I do that. And then this folds up as well. So there's a TV screen here, remote control for the TV screen, and then optionally there's space for a DVD, or in period there would have been a VHS there. So I had the Ottoman out. If I don't have that out, this folds. These are manual on this, but I still have an adjustment, you know, for the headrest. And I've got my rear ventilation controls here. I've got a clock up there, more ventilation. I've got my vanity lights, and then I've got dimming rear view lights back here. So obviously there's lots of room. I've got a seat heater, I've got a seat massager, and what else? And then the electric window. Sound system's excellent, as you would expect, but really it's not the kind of environment where you want a loud piece of music. So this is, I like to keep all this stuff out just because it's fun. I can slide my seat back here to a more upright position, and I can move this seat, this seat here, back. And now I've configured it for 4 people. Okay, so we can look in the trunk. So the trunk is soft close, so it's got a motorized closing system. So it's it's huge, obviously. Now this thing here, this is a case for an ostrich duster, like a big duster, to get your mirror finish on the car. So I don't have that. I'd like to try to find that somewhere. And these are little like towel racks in case you're wiping the car and then you need to let the towels dry. There's a place for that. And there's also a Century tool kit, which is here. I'm not sure what would have been in there. Maybe a flashlight or something like that. I'd like to find that piece too. Okay. So let's put that back. And then it just requires the slightest touch and it closes. The rear doors also have a motorized closure. So you can, and then they'll close. Okay. So under the hood, so let me go to this particular Century. So it's an '02. It's a Generation 2 Century. They call it a GZG50. That's in the VIN. That's 97 to 2016. There weren't many changes in that whole production run, but I think in '06 it got a 6-speed gearbox. So that's one change in this car. This is the 4-speed gearbox. I found this car in Vancouver. There was another video that a automotive engineer did on this particular car that his cousin owned. His cousin was a lawyer in Vancouver. I tracked the car down. I just didn't have the confidence to buy one in Japan just because I really wanted to see it before I bought it, and obviously that's hard to do in Japan. So I got this one in Vancouver and then drove it back to Calgary. We did the out-of-province inspections on it. We did the servicing on it. We replaced some suspension components. We gave it, oil service and transmission service. Had bills for about $6,000. All in all, we did a little bit of paint correction, polishing, waxing, just to get it in its current state. But that's about it. That's about it. The key was falling apart, so I got a new key for it. It presents differently than when I got it, which is basically just 50 or 60 hours worth of polishing and waxing, I think, and cleaning. Okay. There's not too many flaws to pick out. It is a 180,000 kilometer car. If you look closely, you can find some flaws on it. The tires have lots of tread, but they're probably 10 years old. So I can't really justify buying new tires for it, but maybe I will. The wheels have, they're not curbed, but they're oxidized a little bit. Refinishing these wheels is something we probably will get to this winter. And these big center caps, they're a little bit cloudy. And so I might be able to find some more of those. So that the wheel tire assemblies are okay, but maybe not to the standard of the rest of the car. There's the odd mark, touch-up area on the bumpers. We have a little dent here in one of the bumpers. Around the back, we got a little scuff here, which it looks like it just tagged something, and there's a little bit of dent in the chrome fender trim, so there's that. On the rear of the car, it looks like it caught a corner here, and there's a little bit of a scrape on the trim piece. And then we've got some light cracking. It looks like it hit something right there. And then this chrome, there's a little bit of a dent in that too. So it looks like it hit something right there. That's about it. That's about it. That's not bad for 180,000 kilometers in Japan. It came to Canada, to Vancouver, with I think 167,000 kilometers. And now it's got 180 and change. If you look down the sides of the car, it's glass smooth, no marks, no dings. It's basically perfect. Same with the other side. So there's no damage on any of the body panels apart from the little bits on the bumper. And to me, that's the most important thing with the Century is has it had paint work? Because of the week-long painting process, the wet sanding, which I think is 4 or 5 hours between each of the 7 coats, because of that level of detail and work, if it ever gets in an accident, it will never be the same. Like it just won't. I mean, we say that kind of jokingly, oh, the car will never be the same if it gets hit. And we think, well, it'll be the same. But with this car, you're not, like, if you get crunched in the corner, I mean, it's all part of the monocoque. Well, who's going to make sure that all those character lines are perfect in metal without using filler? It would be impossible to replicate this if it was hit. I mean, it wouldn't, you put shiny paint in it, but it wouldn't be the same left to right. They would not be able to do this. Like you can't even send it back to the factory and get them to do it. You know, so if you're buying a Century and it's had a repaint, you know, the odds that it's going to be anything close to the original standards are almost zero. So for me, in my opinion, the purchase decision of which Century to get, it's all about the original paint and the original interior. Because although the cars are affordable to buy, you can never restore them, ever. You can't do it. You'd never be able to get it the same. Even if you were willing to pay, I mean, you'd have to send it to Paul Russell or Bruce Canepa or something like that and get a $100,000 bill for the paint. You'd never be able to do it. You'd never be able to do it. So that's the trouble with just going online, finding a Japanese car website and buying a Century, is you don't know what you're getting because you only get a limited amount of information, a limited amount of photos, and until it gets here, 4 months later, you just don't know. So this car happily has all of its original paint on it, has the original finishes, has the original hand-matched burlwood. There's been no repairs to the interior of the car. The wood isn't cracked. It hasn't sat out in the sun. It hasn't been driven in the salt. It's not rusty underneath. You know, it's not you know, it's a mid-mileage car for a Century. There's lots that are 300,000 kilometers, you know, there's some very low kilometers. So this is a mid-mileage car, but your selection of Centuries in Canada is pretty limited. So I was happy when I saw this car that it ran well, it worked well, and so on. And I was happy with when I paint metered it. It had the original paint. Why don't we do that now? Why don't we do that now? And I'll just show you. Now, keeping in mind that a Century's got thicker paint than a normal car. So if I run it on the fender, I've got 217. These are micrometers. This is 0.2 of a millimeter. And I'm in the twos, 207. .204, 192, 171, 162, 176, 197, 166, 167, 207, 184, 208, 189, 173, 161, 169, 188, 176, 185, 191, 211, 188, 231, 217, 223, 218, 214, 199, 194, 196, and the trunk lid, 219, 239, 223, 238, 278. Now, if I take these meters on the periphery of the car, they're all consistent in the 165 to 200 range. The trunk lid is a little bit thicker, so it may have got some clear, it may have had a problem with it at some time, but it's an isolated panel. And the car did wear Japanese style wing mirrors. And if you look at the paint in some light, you can see some evidence of where the holes were filled for the for those wing mirrors. So the original, I know it's the original paint here, but there has been some paint blown in these areas, even though you can see it's just a little bit thicker, okay? So aside from a little bit of paint blown in the area, and perhaps the front deck lid, although I don't think it had a full repaint, I think it might have just been cleared because it's only a fraction of a millimeter or half a millimeter thicker than the sides. So normally when you refinish something, it's 300s and 400s, but the truth is on that, I don't know. On the rest of the car, on the fenders and the doors and the hood and the roof and stuff, I'm confident that this is original paint, original panel gaps, all these character lines line up perfectly, and so that to me is really the key about buying a Century. I don't want one that's been repainted. It's not going to be, I'm buying this car because of all the handwork that went into finishing it when it was new. If it's all been repainted, it's not going to be the same anymore, and I wouldn't be interested in the car. It checks most of the boxes for a Century. It's the right version, the one with a bespoke V12. You know, it's an original paint car, and so to me, that's the Century to have. Okay, so there's not really much to see. It's, like I said, it's a 5-liter V12. It's about, I think, rated at 286 horsepower. At the time, there was a kind of a gentleman's agreement between Japanese manufacturers to limit power to 286, so everybody had 286. It's probably in the low 300s somewhere. And that was state-of-the-art in the 2000s for a 5-liter engine. I'm missing the cover here for the battery. That's another thing I'd like to find. We can see, you know, a pretty thick insulating pad for the hood, really beefy hoods. These, I had to pay $250 each for the hood struts on these things. It was crazy. Anyway, so, but a very, very smooth, obviously, engine, and, you know, 5 mufflers, and the exhaust pipes are like this big. You can probably free up 100 horsepower just with the exhaust on this car. And there are some interesting articles with people who put performance exhausts, and this thing sounds like a Lexus LFA. Like, I mean, it sounds awesome, which is a tribute to a V12 engine. Actually, they all sound really good. The Jag, the Mercedes, the Toyota Century, as well as the Italians. The only difference in sound between the Italian V12s and the Jag V12 or the Mercedes V12 or the Toyota V12 is the exhaust. They all sound fantastic. There's nothing that special about a Ferrari V12 exhaust note, because just the nature of the crank fires and exhaust pulses of the V12 just make it sound awesome. So the Century is no different. And for a lot of money, you can get a custom-made exhaust, which just transforms the car. But I don't think I'm going to do that because it's not really that kind of a car. So mechanically, I've put about 2,500 kilometers on the car. Drives beautifully, no issues. All the electrical bits work. We did the oil service, we did transmission service. We noticed the steering rack is leaking a little bit. I'm not sure if I'll get to that or not. It's not, I'm going to monitor the loss of fluid and see if it's worth doing or not. But that's something to keep an eye on. It passed the safety inspection. It went to the Toyota dealer. They wanted to replace a bunch of suspension components and I think the rear brakes, so we did that. And then I guess the tires and refinishing the alloys. So I'm driving this car, not very much, but I'm driving it. It's for sale, but I'm enjoying it in the meantime. All of my cars, I've got, you know, lists of things to do, you know, depending on what's going on and how busy we are and how much extra money I have, I'll do those. But for this car, the next items would be I think refinishing the wheels, buying new tires, doing the steering rack, quantifying that, the tires were about $1,000 Canadian. Refinishing each of the wheels is a couple $100 a wheel. I might find a new set of wheel centers if I can, another few $100. The racks are about $1,000, and you don't have to replace the column; you just replace the rack. So those are the items that I'll look to in the future. But I don't need to do anything now. The car drives fine. There's lots of tread on the tires. There's no dry cracking, and it's winter anyway, so I'm not going to drive it in the winter. I think I've described what makes the Century appealing, to me at least, is just that singular focus, over-the-top engineering to create an automobile, but it doesn't have to be an automobile, it can be anything, to create something that is really special using sort of the best of, the best of human engineering, passion, know-how, create the best thing they could. And so to me, there's a pretty short list of products that fall into that category. They're just about all expensive, obviously, but the Century is an automotive version of that, but one that's affordable too. And so that's what made me really fall for the car. And I'm not alone. Like I said, anybody who really gets into learning about a Century just sort of has to have one. To summarize, it's a special car made with a special purpose in mind, executed beautifully, a lot of thought and a lot of passion, a lot of pride. It's almost the pride of the entire Japanese auto industry. And so it's a special car to own, and it's a real treat to take somebody out for a ride. I insist they drive in the back and get the full experience. And I don't drive it that much, but I do take it out to pick somebody up at the airport or take it out on a birthday or a special occasion and so on. And I have to say it's a really special machine and really rewarding to own. And I'm glad it's passed through. All my cars I buy, experience, research, do a video, get to know them, and then I find a home for them, and there's always another car. So this one is available for somebody if they share my enthusiasm for the Toyota Century. Thank you very much. Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada. Aidan Goss for shooting the video. Please like and subscribe.